Welcome, everyone. I am the voice off to the side. I am Erin Grayson. I am our Chief Talent Officer for the YMCA of Central New York, and I will be your MC this evening. I am excited to support this great event that is being broadcasted out to the world to hear from these amazing women who volunteer their time to share some thoughts. So I will let Georgia, Richelle, and Mickey introduce themselves, and then we'll dive in with questions. So we'll start on the far end. So Georgia, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Georgia Popoff. Within the Y, I am the workshops coordinator for the Downtown Writers Center of the YMCA of Central New York. We've had our center for 23 years now, and now we're both online and in person. We're doing hybrid classes in person with readings and workshops. For myself, I'm a poet and nonfiction writer, and in September, I was named the Poet Laureate of Onondaga County for a 2-year term.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice. And thank you for your leadership that you provide our YMCA programs that you lead.
Thank you.
Richelle, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Richelle Gaceta. I am a proud Y spouse and a mom of 3 independent young adults, all out of the house. So our baby now is a Chihuahua pug named Twix, who is being spoiled by grandma at the moment. I love coming to these types of events, especially, women's history and women's leadership, and sharing my career journey. I am sure that you will be able to relate to some of it, even though I am in technology and in healthcare, slightly different from your field. I think our stories always have overlapping, insights. So I'm excited to share my story with you.
Thanks, Richelle. And thank you for being here tonight. And Mickey, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Mickey Piscitelli, and I am a triathlon coach and a running coach and a fitness instructor here at the YMCA. I actually work at the Liverpool and Baldwinsville branches. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades now. And I also have my own women's race that I put on every year in August in Liverpool at Onondaga Lake Park. It's called the Willow Bay 5K Run and Fitness Walk for Women. And it started, I'll tell you the story later, a little bit later on as to how it got started. But that's one of the hats I wear. Another tall hat I wear is I am the chair of women's long distance running for USA Track and Field. So for one of those positions, I have a committee that I work with, and the other one is more of a solo position. But glad to be here with these ladies and interested to hear your questions.
Yeah.
I hope you have some good ones for us.
Well, thank you, Mickey, and thank you for your commitment to support our community in health and wellness. And thank you, all 3 of you, again, for being here this evening. So the first question that we have for you, and hope eventually our folks online and here may have other questions, but the first one that we have is to tell us about your leadership style, 2-part question. So tell us about your leadership style and how it differs from others in your field. And whomever is ready to go can go ahead and share your thoughts on the question of your leadership style and how it differs from others in your field.
Well, I can start. I'll tell you right now, I'm a strong believer in a good idea is a good idea, regardless of who it comes from. And I'm also very big on acknowledging the source of a good idea. So giving credit where credit is due. In one of my positions, I have a 13-person committee that I work with, and we're scattered all over the country. And probably one of the most difficult things I have to do is get a common time to meet because we're working with different time zones. But I've always been big about being prepared for our meetings and bringing something to the table. So don't just show up and sit there during the meeting, actually contribute. All ideas are, out there for us to look at and toss around. And I always am very big on delegating things. I try not to be a micromanager. I figure if you encircle yourself with the right people and you can say to them, if something happens and you can't ask me a question that you think is important, use your own good judgment. I can't tell you how many times I have used the phrase, use your own good judgment, because I trust them to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And if it's not exactly what I would have done, who cares? If the goal is met, that's really all that matters. So everybody has their own style, and I appreciate that, and I embrace it.
Thank you so much, Mickey. I think a few things to highlight in what you shared is that autonomy piece and empowering others, but also to make sure if you're at the table to pick up your silverware and eat and participate. So thank you for those insights. Georgia or Richelle, thoughts?
Thoughts, Richelle, you go first.
Thank you. My leadership style has actually evolved, kind of somewhat in the middle of my career. In the beginning, so what I do, I work for Cigna Healthcare, and what I do is I'm a enterprise principal architect, and we do, in the beginning, in the first half of my career, I was a lot more hands-on, building the actual computers and the systems that power our applications and websites. And I was also trying to get to the principal role that I have just recently achieved. And it was a very hard journey for me to get there. And so the way that I would lead is a lot more control. Like I was controlling the messaging, I was controlling the team, I was controlling the agenda, right? I'm still a team player, I'm still a leader, but I was a lot more hands-on also in the way I wanted things to go. Because part of that was also trying to be assertive in my career to get me to where I wanted to be. But ever since I have, been promoted to the principal role, it's a big deal because the principal role in technology is a director level individual contributor role. But it's the top 5% of the people in tech. And they have us go through a grueling process to get promoted for it. So out of like 9,000 people in tech, there's only 120. And guess how many percent women is in that 120?
1%.
There's a little bit more. There's 10%. So there's 12 women. And I was the third one promoted to that. But it was very hard. So my journey to get to that spot made me really get to know myself a lot more. And because of that, it has also evolved my leadership style now in that I am more about the others. I am more about empowering women. I'm more about mentoring and letting others shine. So when I am leading an initiative within a team, I usually am the one who tries to make sure that everyone gets to speak their ideas and like just round robin it. Or if it's about mentoring the women, the mentees that I have, it's trying to give them the opportunity or, finding ways for them to shine while I support in the background. So it's a long-winded answer to the question, but that's what it is.
Thanks, Richelle. Your what you shared with us reminded me of the quote that we rise by lifting others. And I think, the self-awareness piece of acknowledging that, in the beginning, I needed to be in control and I controlled things to make sure that I was successful, but now seeing the importance of empowering others and specifically investing in mentoring in other women to support them was definitely clear in your message. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's been funny for me to think about myself when I was invited to participate in this panel of, oh, wow, I'm a leader. I just do what I do. And because I have had leadership positions in different elements of community, as editor of a journal for 20 years, a literary journal where I was managing editor for 5, the Downtown Writers Center, especially the last 12 years as workshop coordinator, where I had to work with people and recruit and retain faculty as well as participants. And a lot of the other initiatives in community that I've been involved with, I went, oh yeah, I really kind of am a leader. And it really started originally with, well, somebody's got to do this. I'm the oldest child. And I think the oldest daughter syndrome kicked in, oh yeah, somebody's got to do that. Somebody's got to do this. And I keep winding up on committees and, involved in community projects. So then I realized that the change for me has been from trying to use those leadership positions as a validating factor for me to a forward movement for whatever I'm involved in. With the Writers Center and working there, and even in the classes that I teach, I've learned to be a listener. I've learned to be maybe the last person to talk, or the person to start the conversation, and then kind of corral the conversation sometimes. And the other one for me is gratitude. Especially with our faculty, every email is, I appreciate that you contribute your talents and your time to our success, that you give what you give to our constituents, our students, that they thrive because you give of yourself, and like reminding them of their value to our overall success, which is why we keep growing a little bit at a time, step by step, inch by inch. I appreciate when leaders do that for me. And the other piece is to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. And if they're reluctant to, find a gentle way to say, well, what do you think? I haven't heard from you yet, and kind of make sure that everyone gets a chance to share their views and share their talents and share their perspectives, because the quietest person probably has the most important thing to say.
Yeah.
Thanks, Georgia. And you are 100% a leader, but I think we fall into those societal ideals of supposed to's, or what that's supposed to look like, and acknowledging the importance of creating space and listening and acknowledging and being grateful are so many factors that in the research that's coming out today, and saying that those are so important for leadership. And when we look at leadership and understanding that your quiet leadership creates those opportunities for others. And so thank you for that. So our next question is around motivation. So what motivated you to take on leadership roles, and what keeps you motivated?
I'll start this one. Back in the day, it was bossiness. I think it should be done this way. Like, if I did it, it's going to be good. My motivation now is the satisfaction of a job well done and seeing other people thrive. If within my role in the Y, if I'm able to support faculty in learning new skills. I mean, there's some people who never taught. They were writers and they never taught until I said, hey, would you teach a class? Well, I don't know what to do. And there's a lot of mentoring in that. And even people who are very, very skilled and experienced in teaching. It's our organization at the Downtown Writers Center takes a different kind of teaching. So somebody said to me the other day that one of our new faculty members was commenting on how the critique process in the workshop he was teaching was so positive, and everybody was just so giving and still constructive, still expecting that every word worked and it mattered. They were very interested in quality, but he said, boy, you're just so nice to each other, but not just patting each other on the back. And the person who's telling me the story said, I wish I had told him that's because that's the climate you've created. And that was such an incredible compliment that I haven't done that alone, but that is what we provide in our community. Phil Memmer and I, that's it. Like, this is where people come to grow and to flourish and to enjoy each other and to be creative. And if there's two kinds of people in adult education that I've noticed. One are the lifelong learners who come into a situation to say, I want to learn more, and I think you can teach me. So here I am. And then there's the people who consume education who said, I paid you to teach me what I think I need to know. And if you don't teach me exactly what I think you're going to teach me, then we have a problem. And what I find is the people who come into our programming at the Y, if they come in with that frame of mind, they're kind of fish out of water with us. The lifelong learners, even in an exercise class, it's the person who comes in and says, teach me how to use my body better. Teach me how to swim better, rather than, I want you to teach me the breaststroke. If you don't teach me the breaststroke, you haven't done it right. Those people, they don't stay in our community that much, so we constantly are creating an environment of growth and acceptance. And I think that's super important.
Thanks, Georgia. Yeah, the motivating by seeing others be inspired. And what I heard too is that you use that skill of calling forth and seeing something in somebody and giving them that space to step into that and grow.
Keep trying.
So others, what motivates you?
In the tech world, I guess it's a different lens. So when I was like maybe 25 years of my 28 years career, I was what you call an infrastructure engineer, where you do support and maintain those systems that run the websites, and you make sure that they're always up and running so that anyone who wants to come into Cigna.com or expressscripts.com and check to make sure whether their mail order prescription is going to get delivered, or you need a renewal, right? Or you need to check your benefits if it's going to be covered. So making sure that those systems are up and running, was critical, right? And my motivation was part of that, like trying to just make sure that our systems were running efficiently and, less impact to our patients. But then, there's also the side of it where I just truly love the tech. And so, it was kind of like a challenge, always making sure that all the systems are up and running. The other side of it now, I pivoted my career again recently, 4 years ago, because I wanted to be much closer to the healthcare experience. So now I work on applications that look at how do we help our doctors be able to get you your MRI or procedure in a much more efficient way without having to always call or fax, all the different proof that you do need this MRI or you do need this prescription. So I moved to a space where I'm a lot closer to helping the patient, like me, my family, right? You, like a lot more direct. And so my motivation there is just that, trying to make an impact in the day-to-day life that I see everyone experiences, right? My family, my friends, you. So my motivation is to try to make an impact there.
Thanks, Richelle. And I appreciated that, like, the way you beautifully explained that in the beginning, it was about that self like motivation, and I felt challenged. And now it's like, I want to impact and support others in that transition. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Mickey, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'm very big on fairness. So when I first started my women's race, it was at the same time that it was decided that the women could run the 5K, the 5,000 meter race in the Olympics. Okay. Up until that point, the furthest we could run was 3,000 meters, which was a little bit less than 2 miles. So this was a big victory for women everywhere, that we were going to be able to run longer distances equal to the men's distance. So we needed to create a system throughout the country where women can work themselves up to that longer distance instead of the 3,000 meters, the 5,000 meters. So I was reading an article, and it was written by Catherine Switzer, which I don't know if it's a name that any of you would recognize, but she was the first woman to actually run the Boston Marathon. She signed up as KV Switzer. She didn't use Catherine as her name because back then women were not allowed to run that distance. And she entered the race, and she wore sweatshirt and sweatpants, and she had a hat on, and she didn't look very feminine, let's put it that way. And she was actually grabbed by the race director and thrown off the course. So she decided that she was going to start a series of 5K races in the United States. And I thought, we should do that. So I went to my Syracuse Chargers track club board of directors, which I was a member. I was seated on the board. I still am, after all these years. And I said to them, we should have a women's race here in Syracuse, women only, 5K. And they were like, hey, I like that idea. Why don't you do that, Mickey? So it's one of those situations of, if you're going to bring it up, you better back it up. So I said, I remember going home to my husband that night and saying, he said, how'd the meeting go? And I said, well, I'm going to put on a 5K race. And he said, good? Meaning, is that a good thing? Or, is that what you wanted? And I said, well, I'll have help. But it was 100% a good thing. And, I asked myself this, I brought some questions with me. 2 questions I frequently ask myself. How hard can it be? What have I got to lose? So whenever I see something that I think, oh, that's a good goal, I ask myself those 2 questions. And I try not to think of it as some grandiose plan that has to be perfect. It's just like, I think I can do this. I'll need some help along the way, but that's what motivated me. The lack of equity with the women and men in road racing. So that's what kicked off my career as a race director. And here I am still doing it. It'll be 29 years this August.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I'm very proud of that.
Mickey, can I add to that? The 2
Yeah.
questions that I ask myself when I'm hesitant about something is, what's the worst that can happen? And if it did, what would I do? Because if I know what I would do, then if the worst happened, which usually it doesn't, I have a plan. And that takes a lot of the trepidation out of things. And I apply that in my personal life. And I also apply that in my professional life, like just thinking ahead of if the worst that happened, what are my choices then? And knowing that ahead of time goes right with those 2 questions.
I don't ask 2 questions. I say 2 things. One is, whatever doubt I'm feeling, they're feeling it too. And the other thing is, just do it. Like the Nike commercial. I have that all over my monitor. Just do it.
I also have a 3-part mantra that I say regularly, and I share often, which is, it comes from my good friend Sue Stonecash years ago. She goes, stop trying to prove yourself. She says, just keep doing the good work. And then I add to it, let the work speak, proceed and be bold. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't remind myself or somebody of that. Keep doing the good work, let the work speak, proceed and be bold. And take enough satisfaction in those things that I don't I don't have to seek somebody saying, that was really good. You're really good. That I like when people compliment me for what I've done, but it's more in the satisfaction of doing something well. The satisfaction of seeing something happen that I envision, and then when it is manifested, you go, oh my God, yay, it worked. My idea worked. Like being online for the Writers Center, I went in about 6 years ago to Phil and pitched that idea. It wasn't financially viable at the time, but man, it's great to see it working now, that Zoom gives us the opportunity, and, Google gives us the opportunity to do it so easily. But it was like, I was right. That's coolness. And now how can we make it better?
Very nice.
So yes, and thank you it's always good to have those anchor either questions or mantras that help ground us. And Vicki, thank you for your leadership. One of the things that came up when you asked your second question, which is, what do I have to lose?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when you were sharing your story, when I hear that question, I think, what do I have to lose if I try this? But what came up for me is, what do I have to lose if I don't do this? And I may never have this opportunity again, right?
Right. Sometimes things only come up once in a while. I may never have this opportunity again. So you can't sit around and think about it too long. If you think it's a good idea, take action.
Yeah. And so that's what came up for me, especially with your story of like, well, there's a lot to lose if I don't try. Right. And with all three of you sharing what I heard, and they were all different, but your core values of coming up of like that internal motivation of like being true to who you are and what is important to you and showing up to motivate you. So thank you for sharing. So I think we started to dance around this next question a little bit already, but the next question we have for you is, what are some ways that you have found support throughout your career? We've danced around it a little bit in talking about supporting others, but this is about you. So what ways have you found support throughout your career?
Maybe I can start this one. It's a lot more finding mentors to help me. Mentors have been very big for me in my career. And I didn't really seek them until, again, the middle of my career, where I realized that I am not managing my career. I was going through the job progression. And I guess at the time, your focus is you're starting a family, right? You were just using the job to support your family and to do other things outside of it. But later on, I was having this lunch with some of my senior engineer coworkers, and they were all talking about moving to the next level. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never thought of that for me. So as soon as I kind of realized that, then I started knocking on people's doors. Like, basically, I look for women who seem very strong in what they do. And sometimes I would just knock on their door and I'm like, I've been watching you work and I'm so amazed by you. Can you mentor me? And, a lot of the times they say yes. And you just have to stick with like managing the schedule to meet with them. But when they do spend the time with you, you learn so much about, different types of skills that they have learned, as well as seeing something in yourself that you don't normally see, and others do. So mentorship for me has been the most help. There are also a lot of men leaders, because tech is a male-dominated field. And so a lot of my managers were male. And I've met a lot of them that were very good and very supportive. And they too have helped mentor me a lot. So
thanks, Richelle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that mentoring piece I think is so important to find others. But what I heard you share was a little bit of the falling into the supposed to's, right? And like when you talked about like you weren't managing your career, you were just doing what's next and what, you know, is put out there as this is how you're supposed to do that. And then realizing like, wait a second, I can step into this. I have control. And I think there's bravery in asking, knocking on somebody's door and saying, hey, I really admire you. Can I learn from you? And I think that when I talk to other women, we fall into, I don't want to be a burden. And so knowing that when you ask somebody and say, I admire you, can I learn from you? That's acknowledging the gift that person has, right? And to know that also we tend to want to take care of other people. So we make up the response of if somebody has capacity, but realizing it's that person's responsibility to say, no, I do or don't have capacity. But I think it is brave to say, hey, I admire you and can I learn from you? And to know that most of the time somebody's going to say, yes, of course. So, and to step into that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Erin, in response to that too, I think sometimes, particularly as women, we don't want to admit that we might want help, that we need help, that we know we can grow. You know, we're supposed to have it all together. And that if there's a confusion in asking for mentorship is indicating that, you know, we have a weakness in some form rather than we're looking to expand our own self-knowledge and the knowledge of what it is that we are engaged in, and that somebody else can give us that. But I think, you know, that idea of ever admitting that you don't know something is so like, there's something wrong about doing that in our internal systems. That it does, when you say brave, it does take courage to do that.
Yeah. And Georgia, that reminds me of, you know, whenever it makes sense to share this statistic that when women apply for jobs, they feel that they need to check every single box and meet 100% of the qualifications on the job posting. Statistically, for men who apply for jobs, they only need to meet 20%. And so when we think about the difference in that and understanding that as women, of needing to have all the answers, not ask for help, being able to come in and prove that we're good. And then when we look at the difference in that gap that we have in the workplace of, well, you know, men step in and they only need 20%, you know, that difference really comes up and resonates too of like, if I want to ask somebody to support me, is it saying that I don't know something and is that okay? And knowing that, you know, as leaders, we need to have that investment in ourselves to be able to invest in others.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, earlier today I was in Target and there was a t-shirt that said, empowered women empower women. And I thought, doesn't that really say it all? And I'm sure it was front and center because it's being March for Women's Leadership Month. But I just thought, how true?
Yeah, it really takes a person to go through a self journey first to find yourself, be comfortable with yourself, like, you know, accept yourself. Right. I found that I needed to go through that for myself before I was able to truly be open to helping others in a lot more priority, like, you know, like almost everything that in every aspect of what I do day to day, it's really a very different mindset than where I was before. But I had to go through this career journey and also, you know, a lot of changes in my own personal life where I had to be accepting of who I am before I could get there. And sometimes I tell my mentees that too, like, I know anyone can do anything they want to. It's just a matter of preparing yourself and getting yourself to the point where you tell yourself, I really want this. And when you are there, there's no barriers, like we can do anything. So
And I think it carries over to coaching. As I said earlier, I do quite a bit of coaching. To me, you can coach swimming technique, and you can coach cornering on a bicycle, or you can coach running. But really, I think you have to be able to make the athlete believe in themselves. You can be the most fantastic technician in the world, but if your athlete doesn't go to the start line thinking, I've got this, TYT, trust your training, they have to have it in their heads like, I've done enough, I am good enough, I can do this. I'm not going to come in first, and if I come in last, that's okay, but I can do this. So I think that's important.
I do a lot of editing and book coaching. And that's basically what I do with my clients, is let them know, you're learning skills, but look at how you've grown. You've got this. You got it. Look at what you did today. You did really good work today. And you should be giving this time to it. But also, I think one of the things that comes up a lot in my conversation, if we go back to the idea of support, a lot of my support comes from trusted, close, people who I'm close to, who I can work out a problem with and talk to, or examine a fear, or run an idea past before I go out into the world with those things. But over the years, so many of us have had the conversation of imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
That, we get all dressed up and get our costumes on and go into our roles. And inside of us, there's this little voice going, you really shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And, I think I just finally got past that about 3 months ago. All of a sudden it just clicked like, oh no, I really know what I'm doing. I'm really good at what I'm doing. And it's not wrong for me to admit that. I've worked really hard for a really long time. And I've sacrificed a lot to do it. And I know what I'm doing. And I do it well. And I know my intention. I know I'm not perfect. But I deserve to sit at any table, including this one, which kind of surprised me.
Imposter syndrome is a very popular topic in a lot of these women talks and women mentoring. We also just had our Women in Technology conference in Connecticut, actually, last week. And, there's a lot of early career women there, and we talk about imposter syndrome. But I deal with imposter syndrome every single day. I mean, to this day. I mean, I don't think I will ever get past it, but it's okay, because the way that I handle it is much better than I was before. And so there's always going to be that voice behind you that says, you're not good enough. Your makeup looks funny today, your hair is messy, or you're too young, or, you don't have enough experience to be in this table. It's constantly talking, right? But then it's a lot of effort, but I do make a big effort to say, I'm not listening to you right now. Or, yes, you're talking there, but I also know that I have these other good things about me. So it's just about managing it every single day and every single time. And going back to the support, I have Walter. He knows a lot of, imposter syndrome and all my doubts and everything. And it's so wonderful to be able to kind of talk to, like you mentioned, somebody you trust, right? To talk about your fear and your doubts, and, kind of keep you strong and keep the voice down behind you.
And know who your cheerleaders are.
Yeah.
As well as be one for others. Knowing who your own cheerleaders are is critical.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that we in most cases would never speak to other people the way that we speak to ourselves and those voices in our heads. But what I heard you both share, or all three of you share too, is that self-awareness piece, which is actually scientifically backed study, that it's the foundation of being an effective leader is having that self-awareness, right? And knowing how you show up in spaces, but then having that community. You know, we talked specifically about mentorship, but community is even it's different. You know, your mentors can be a part of your community, but you can also have, you know, that inner circle of those folks who you can trust, who can support when you need that, and have that safe space where you can show up and be your full authentic self to be able to work through things. But also having those like, okay, voice, you're not helpful right now. And this is where I need to go. And this is what I believe. And, you know, Georgia, you sharing to say, you know, I can be at any table and I should be, and, you know, that's really so I so admire the strength that I heard in your voice when you shared that, and how hard it is for, you know, us to feel comfortable to be like, yeah, I am supposed to be here and I'm here for a reason. Is great. So thank you for sharing. Anything else to add around where you found support throughout your journey and your career?
Family.
Family.
Yeah. Kids, parents, sisters, the joy of your life, I guess, you know.
I think it's interesting because when we think of traditional leadership, which is, I think has been shown to the door of leadership from 20 years ago, you know, it was a model of being alone and being strong and very male dominant. But when we talk about the characteristics in leadership, which can be referred to as soft skills, but they're not soft, but because sometimes they're the hardest skills to learn, but they're all around connection and people and support. And to be able to be successful, to have that connection, you know, leads to that competency and that autonomy to be successful.
I do have a note on this.
I love these notes.
I have 5 totally, so don't freak out. I don't have a whole stack of them. I wrote down, I just, you know, you are responsible for your own success, but you don't have to start from scratch. So when I became chair of the Women's Long Distance Running Committee for USA Track and Field, it was a big responsibility, but others had come before me. And I had other people kind of in that same level of engagement as I would be stepping into. And I asked away. And you know what? You found quickly, you triage quickly the people who want to help and want to give and aren't threatened. And the people who don't respond to your emails or don't look you in the eye when you ask them a question. So you learn, you learn quickly who is on your team and who really is kind of abstaining, shall we say.
Yes. And knowing that that's okay because you have people to support you.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, in my personal journey, but other women that I talk to as well, of being okay, of like, if you're not on my team and it's okay. I got other people, right? I don't need to, it doesn't serve me to pour into this relationship.
Erin, can I add something too that's come to mind? I've thought that a lot about the fact that I'm not expendable, or I am expendable. That anything could happen. And I'm not the only person who can do a job. I'm not the only person who does it a certain way. And this is particularly important now because I'm changing my role, this year with the Writers Center. And I figured out a long time ago, if I've done my job well enough, it'll be fine if I'm not doing it. If I haven't done it well enough, it's better that I'm not doing it, and it's time for me to move. And I'm not accepting that one. I'm taking the first one. But that was like, I constantly had to, over my my lifetime in different, I've tried like 7 different career paths before I finally settled into what, just like, yeah, I got to be a poet. That recognition that it's not all about me. It's not all on my shoulders. It's not, and I still have to, that's one I have to tell myself every day, especially during campaign season, like, yeah. But when I can say, yeah, if I've done a good job, then I'll leave the groundwork for somebody else to step in and continue to move forward. And if I haven't been doing that, it's time for somebody else to do it.
Georgia, what I hear you sharing is that it's not about you, it's about the work and leaving it better than you found it. And when we separate our ego from the work, that's where the good work happens, right? Because we don't need to, we're not hustling for our worth. We're not trying to prove our worth. We're just doing the good work, and it's not about us. And
I think people project onto us that because so many people do work from that ego space, that they project onto others that when it might not even be our intention. I mean, I know that I know the instances that I've been misinterpreted because somebody else has projected onto me what they think my intention is as a leader, as a voice, as a presence. I've gotten quite used to being misinterpreted, but I know what my intention is, and it's always for the highest good for all involved. And how can I be of service? How can I be of service? And I just was given the honor of joining the University of Michigan Press as an editor, part-time gig, but kind of an important one. And I can be of service to American letters by editing this series of books about important poets in American writers, and that's always my motivation is how can I be of service to others? And when we operate from a point of service rather than personal satisfaction, we get the personal satisfaction. We get the affirmation that our work is good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Georgia. So this next question leads us to challenges. So what are some challenges that you have faced as a leader, and how have you worked through them?
How many hours do we have?
So many.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that comes to my mind as a race director. When COVID hit, were there races taking place? No. Were people even allowed to run together? No. So for that 1 year, I did not hold my race. People found a way to stay fit. The Y was closed, but sponsorships dried up big time. How many businesses went out of business? Lots. So that was a challenge, and I just kind of scaled down things a bit. And I really thought about who would connect with my theme, and that was to make women healthier and fitter by exercise. And so I had to kind of reframe things. But yeah, I think COVID did a number on my focus for quite a while. Yeah.
On all of us. Everything's different.
And Mickey, it sounds like you were able to pull that back by finding the WHY again.
Yeah.
Of like what's your goal?
What's the focus? Yeah. What's the main point here? And how can I still keep us focused on that?
Thank you for sharing.
In the tech world, I would categorize my challenges into external and internal, right? I mentioned a little bit about the internal, like my imposter syndrome, which is never going away. But I also did a lot of external challenges, which is mostly people. And I've had a lot of challenges coming from men, very strong men leaders, but also from women. But the instances that probably bothered me the most is when, certain men leaders who are probably not as versed about diversity, or I don't know what the whole background is, but, when they start questioning a lot about your value in a team, like, what is your role? What are you contributing? What are you trying to do? And then the way that they wanted to work is to totally control the way you would message something, anything that you're trying to produce. He's trying to control the messaging because he wanted to be the leader of the whole initiative. He wasn't as open. I don't encounter many of that, but when I did, it was very emotional. And it really does, make you start questioning yourself, because he's a senior leader in a top company. And there must be a reason why he became, to that position, right? And am I the only one experiencing this? Is it me? Or is he like that to other women? So like, have I heard any other complaints? So there's a lot of these questions that come to your mind, mostly questioning yourself. And then, you fight back, you talk to others, you find support, and it could be other men, or it could be HR, or it could be other women. And, you just gather your courage back up and say, no, I have a seat at the table. I have a contribution to make. You have insecurities, I have insecurities, but I'm just going to continue moving on, Those are the toughest.
Yeah. If someone asks me a question that I think is inappropriate or probing or just plain none of their business, I always say, why do you ask?
Good one.
And they seldom have a good answer. So try that the next time. So, they usually will look at you as if to say, and yeah. So.
Well, and I mean, gaslighting is real, because that's what you described, Richelle. It's that those moments where people who are falling into ego, as we talked about before, are questioning their security, which then is questioning our worth, because they need to be better, or they need this. And so that gaslighting is real, and having that self-awareness, but also that community around you is so important. And yesterday I was looking for something in for one of the programs we're doing, and I happened to run into a sticker that said, "I wish you the confidence of a mediocre white male." So when you're in that space in the future, which I hope you never are, just remind yourself of that.
Oh, that's a good one. Can we have t-shirts with that one too?
So other challenges and how you have worked through them.
No, I was always felt at a deficit because I was not able to finish my collegiate career. And that always because we judge people's value by how many initials are after their name, all of that, I always felt less than. And it was often an obstacle for jobs that I could have done really easily. But the false construct that that's the only level of success was really hard, and made me feel a lot of times like I had to prove myself in other ways, or I had to make an argument for. And when I realized, for instance, as a writer, I haven't gone through the academia as my path, which I used to believe would have been a lot easier. I'm glad I'm not in academia now. I much prefer working in community. But there were securities that felt like that's what you had to do. And I didn't have those securities. And when I started to realize that I was out publishing a lot of people who were my peers as writers, in spite of maybe working 3 jobs to pay the bills, I started paying attention to myself as someone who refuses to take no for an answer. And to say, yep, in spite of all the obstacles, look at what you've done, which is why 3 months ago, all of a sudden I said, you know what? I'm really very successful as a human being. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. And I'm secure in that in a way I wasn't before, which is making the years ahead of me that I'm examining now feel much less threatening. But that was a really big, that traditional advanced degree thing was a huge obstacle for me. And the other one was being a woman. I mean, in one of my incarnations, I sold insurance, life, health, and disability insurance. And that was definitely a man's business. And I had someone, a potential client, sit across from me and 2 colleagues and just go, what are you doing here? Why are you sitting there?
Yeah.
Because we want your business. Fortunately, I had a business partner at that time who just looked at him and said, Miss Popoff is here because she has the expertise to speak to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, we walked out and he says, I don't want his business. It was very sobering, though,
Well, and I think having people in our life that support in that way, it's huge. Of being like, our values or what I believe in or believing in you is more important than the money that that person who I don't want to work with has. And I think also understanding our definition of success versus society's definition of success. And I hope that we're moving into a space where experience is recognized as much as education, if not more, to be able to create opportunities that are equitable for people. But I think we tend to compare, which can be the thief of joy. And that if we're like, well, I don't live up to that because I don't have that degree or I don't have this, where again, I think what I heard you speak to, Georgia, is that this is what success looks like for me. And man, I am a successful human. And look at this, opposed to fitting into what others' definitions are. And I think that's hard to do. And it's, it takes work.
Yeah. And I think I was the last person to do it. I think, other people have seen me as successful, and I had to join the club.
Yeah. I can totally relate on the, being the only woman. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of initiatives where even in a team, I guess all throughout my career was mostly like that. Started in high school when I first did my very first computer programming competition. I was the only woman. That was in high school. And it just continued on, all the way up to being an architect, usually the only woman out of 9 or 10 very strong males. But they become very good friends of mine as well. But yeah, on certain initiatives where, my manager tries to find opportunities for me, throws me into this group of very smart, outspoken leaders, and sends me as his representative for the group to define our strategy on how are we going to use the new technology out there, public cloud, Amazon Web Services, right? Or Microsoft stuff. Like, it's very, very intimidating because their voices are so loud that you have a hard time inserting yourself. And usually we work virtually, even though we have our monitors on. I always turn on my monitor because that's one way of like being present in the room, right? You have to show your face. Because their voices are so loud in the beginning, it's always very hard to insert yourself. And so sometimes what I do is I try to meet one-on-one with starting with the lead of the group and just kind of positioning him, saying that, hey, I'm here. And this is what I can contribute. Like, this is my background and the reason why I'm added into this group, and I kind of try to get to know him a little bit too. Like, what's your background? And it helps me just level the playing field. When I get to know the other person as another human being, just like me, I always see that we are equal because I see the other parts about him, insecurities, family, career history, maybe some of his goals too. And it helps level my playing field. So the next time I join that initiative, because of that, then my voice kind of rises a little bit. And that's how I fight my way into just evening the voices in the room. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that relationship building and the connection and humanizing. But it also came up for me of like, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to do that?
Yeah.
I have a question from online, if now's a good time for that.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so this is actually a question from Chelsea, which is, how do you prioritize mentorship and professional development when zany work schedules and priorities at home compete?
All right. So how do you prioritize mentorship and leadership development when zany schedules and home commitments compete?
Correct. Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
For me, it's just what's the next thing on the priority list. Okay, that one's done. The next, and reminding myself that I have to bigger priority above mentorship and professional development is quiet time to just regroup.
So it's making it a priority. It's on the list.
Yeah.
I think your priority list is in a state of flux all day long, all week long, all month long. I think you just reshuffle the deck as things come up, and you put out the fires with a big hose if you can, and some things just have to simmer.
I'm sorry. Oh,
My personal priority now is not as chaotic as before. The good thing is it's not as chaotic. It's usually just my dog begging to be walked, right? Or that I want to go to play tennis, right? So it's because the bad thing is it's because we're empty nesters. And so our kids are no longer home. They're independent, so we miss them very much. But when they were at home, that was a lot harder, definitely. Finding balance between, all your meetings and picking up my daughter from school or, going to an event. That was a lot of juggling there. And I always say that communication you have with your partner, to kind of figure out who can go to what, right? Divide and conquer. It is a very big thing that helps with that. But then there's also the other side where if it's something really important for my child or for my family, then you can always reschedule a meeting, and the good thing with our company is they're very open to that too. And a lot of our leaders stress that if it's something important for you, for your family, for your health, prioritize that. And they, for the most part, they really don't, let you manage your own time with the work. Like now I'm able to say, like last week, there was a women conference. I had to cancel a lot of my meetings or reschedule them. And then when I was at a panel there too, I tell people that, guess what? Those meetings that you rescheduled will be there next week. So, but this, is a once a year event. So I always prioritize those. So.
A number of years ago, I was feeling that I was always so focused on the to-do list. And even when I would have unreasonably long to-do lists for any given day to start. And when I got through the day, everything that wasn't checked off, I would find fault with myself. Like, how did you miss that? You didn't do that. I might have done all the other things, but I didn't do that one. And, those ways we beat ourselves up. So I started a practice of keeping an accomplishment log during the day. And I kept a little notebook with myself, those little pocket ones you get at the grocery store, little spiral ones. And I pick up at conferences, go trick-or-treating at conferences for stuff like that.
True.
But I started writing down everything I did do during the day, starting with waking up. Like that's the start. That's the first thing you accomplish, right? You're in your day. And everything, because I was dismissing things like I cleaned the toilets and I had that meeting. And and when I started to look at what I did do during the day, now I still needed the to-do list to keep me focused. But when I really added in everything that I was doing, I was going, my God, how do I even sleep? Look at all this stuff. And it changed my perspective because I started being more aware of what it takes to get through a day. And then I started keeping my gratitude journal. And 5 things I'm grateful for every day. And it can be a small thing. It can be a big thing. The 5th is always I'm grateful for this life. I'm grateful for this day in this life. I'm grateful for being at this point in my life, but I'm grateful to be alive. And then I redefined the difference between a deadline and a goal. They are not the same. A goal is a focal point that can change, just like the to-do list can change, or the priorities can change. A goal is something to look at and say, I'm heading that direction. That's what I want. I know what I want to accomplish. Deadlines are in search of that goal, that focus. There are certain deadlines I have to meet, certain deliverables I have to do. There are certain tasks that need to be done. And they are often still negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
They are often still, you can say, I need one more week. Very rarely is it something that's so set in stone that the world is going to stop turning. And when I started working from those things, the accomplishment log, gratitude journal, and recognizing the difference between a goal and a deadline, those feelings of possible failure, that you didn't do well enough, you didn't work hard enough, you didn't work at all, any of those ways that it's so easy to fall into a pit of self deprecation. I had far fewer reasons to fall into that pit.
So that's interesting. When I think of deadlines, I think of my commitment to a group of people versus, to me, a goal is a deal I would make with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to keep both.
Mm-hmm.
So I think goal setting is important. Personal goals and business goals, because it just gives you something to work a little harder for,
But if you don't meet the goal, you just adjust the goal.
Right, because it's between you and
right.
you. Yeah.
Yep.
It's in a state of flux, I think.
Mm-hmm. Deadlines definitely help the to-do list get done.
Everything has to be time boxed, right?
We have another question from the.
We do.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
So this is a 2-part question coming in from Onondaga. So the first part of the question is, how do you keep up with the ever-changing world? And then the second part of the question is, how do you manage finances?
All right. So how do you keep up with the ever-changing world? And then how do you manage finances? I'm glad I don't have to answer that.
There's no choice but to keep up with the ever-changing world. And accepting that is, change is good. Yeah. Change is good. Change is helpful. Change is creative. Change is ever there. So just learning that, again, if I do it well enough, it's okay. And if I don't, I got to move. I don't fear change the way I used to.
Well, Darwin, I think, basically adapt or become extinct. Another good t-shirt. Well, really, I mean, if you don't change, everything just passes you by. Financially, the leadership roles I have don't affect my personal finances. It's volunteer work. I don't get any money from those two positions. So it's personal finances and we're good.
Yeah. I guess for me, it depends on which world. If it's the tech world, it is a lot of work to keep up with it. You do have to go to conferences, read up, test, go to the various vendors and learn and study. If it's the US world, it's chaotic, but you actually, maybe you find the good changes, like you said. Like, for example, we're a lot more open to LGBTQ. We're a lot more open to, all the different kinds of races, the diversity, right? It's very good changes. And we're a lot more open to these kinds of talks to empower women. And I love it. So when, I guess you find those good changes that you can connect to and you prioritize your time to support it. In terms of individual tech with day-to-day tech, that one gets tricky. I just on my phone alone, for managing my to-do list, I used to have a book, but now I have Google Task, I have Google Calendar, or I have Microsoft OneNote, or I have, all these different apps. It's nonstop. It keeps coming, right? So you try one, and if you try to stick with it, and if something else better come along, you try it again, and you just wing yourself around it. And I guess try to have fun, just keep exploring and finding the good in the changes. I'm not quite sure if I understood the finance question. But if it's managing my finances, I use Excel. There you go.
You have a system that supports you.
Yeah.
And then what I heard was to be curious about things that are changing, but also to use things that serve you best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what are those things? And then have those systems to support. So our next question that we have on our list is, how do you encourage other women in your career and in life? So personally and professionally, how do you encourage other women? And we talked a little bit about this already with mentorship.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in my company, after I got promoted as a principal, I realized that when I got promoted, I was the third and fourth. So there were two of us. And when I realized that there were only 4 of us out of 60 at the time, now there's 120, and we went through our own journey individually, not knowing each other. I immediately said, we need to get together and huddle and form a team and help anyone else who wants to go through this. So we formed a grassroots movement. Grassroots because we didn't have an HR partner then. We basically had to go through the corporate directory and look up the names and say, is she a woman or she's not a woman? And if she's a woman, we put that in our spreadsheet. And then we met with them one by one and say, hey, what's your career goal? And do you know that there is this program that women can move to if you want to? And by the way, we can help you. Like we're open to mentoring. So we started this program. We called it Boosting Women in Technology. And what was your original question again?
How we support women.
Yes. Okay. There. Yeah. So out of that came the mentoring that we do. And a lot of the women that we sought after were very open to it, and they were very appreciative that there are other women in the company who is coming to help them. I mean, Cigna is a 75,000 employees. It's very big. We have ERGs. We have lots of ERGs for women also, women networking, women in the whole enterprise women group. But because the scope is so big for those programs, what they talk about has to be varied, right? So there's not a lot about specific to being a technical person who wants to be promoted. So the reason why all these individual small pockets of little women group is because you have a little bit more narrow scope and more targeted to the particular soft skills or skills, technical skills that you need for your area. And so ours is focused more on the technical women who wants to grow in our area. So that experience is just wonderful. It's very helpful both ways. I learned so much from them and they learned so much from me, and definitely a win-win. It's always very rewarding.
Yeah, when I created the Willow Bay 5K Run and Fitness Walk for Women, it was to create a space for women to compete. Before then, the races were all in the area were co-ed, and some of the women felt uncomfortable or felt like, oh, I don't want to be in a crowd with men. They'll be so much faster than me. Well, first of all, somebody has to be last. So take that off the table. But I think they just feel accepted and welcomed at the race. I think it became a stepping stone for them to go and do other races down the line. They got their confidence built up. In fact, in the early years of the race, we actually had a running coach from the North Area Y organized a group of a dozen or so women, and she took them from, we used to call it, I think, the couch to the 5K. So you took non-active women and got them walking, got them running until they got to the point where they can complete the 5K. And we acknowledged them at the race and had that running coach come up. And we thanked them for introducing that whole group of new people, new faces to a sport that they had never really even dreamt that they could do. I mean, it was just, just instilling the confidence and taking them through methodical training and saying, look, you just baby steps, you will get there. So I think that's how the Willow Bay race welcomes women. It's just saying, yes, you can do your thing here. We accept you as you are, and let's have fun with this. And not making it too serious, keeping it fun.
Thank you. What I heard in both your stories is creating that safe space too, to a safe space to try something new or to do something that you wouldn't necessarily have felt comfortable, a safe space to grow and ask questions, right? Mm-hmm. And to make sure that, in a work setting, that it's like, it's okay to have questions. It's okay to learn. So I appreciated that in those.
There was a question about the women in your personal life. I have two beautiful daughters, and well, they see a lot of what I do at work. And of course, I'm always trying to share my experience there. but it's also very different, right? Being a mom of two young adults now, I actually learned a lot more from them because, like, when we talk about, LGBTQ or, the gender equality, they teach me about their perspective and things that I, because of my background growing up in the Philippines, it's not diverse at all. I mean, we all look the same, right? The ones who stand out is like the occasional American visitor. And so we didn't have that kind of background growing up. And it was very strict, very traditional, very Catholic kind of upbringing. And then so coming here, it's like a total shock. But my two girls grew up here. And so they see that in the school and they teach me about their new world. And so it's more the reverse when it comes to home.
Well, I think it's important to give space to, women and young women in our life to share their thoughts and ideas and to give them the power for us to learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that they have important things to share.
I also have made a habit through most of my adult life of having women way showers who are older than me and who could give me alternatives and understanding and, a sounding board based on experience, like having elders that I could turn to. And maybe those elders were when I was in my 20s, they were in their 40s, or when I was, sometimes they were older, but I've always maintained the habit of having, and it's not intentional. I just have managed this, that I've always got a small group of women who have more experience than me that I can turn to. Mm-hmm. And then I've become a woman like that for younger women, that to share. And not from that, let me tell you what to do, but do you have a question? Maybe, what if you looked at it this way? And listening, again, asking a question, recognizing, like, as far as supporting other women, recognizing who they really are and reflecting in them what their talents are and what their own potentials are. And saying, have you tried this? You ever taught writing before? You can do it. It's easy. You should try it. If you like it, I'll help you. You don't worry about what it takes to run a classroom. I can tell you how to do that. Do you think you'd like it? And accepting it myself, I refuse complacency. Complacency to me is the same as like starting your death a little early. Like if you just got to keep growing. You've got to keep learning. You have that curiosity thing again, like being curious about life, being curious about your work, being curious about the people you work with and for. Those things make a difference, and it brings with it a sense of satisfaction and joy.
Thanks, Georgia. Yeah, and what I heard you speak to is making sure that those women feel seen, right? And I see you. And then Richelle was sharing too of creating the women's group at work. It's like that, representation really is important, for women to see themselves, in this case, in the role that you're in your organization, and to say, you can do this too. And, we can repeat that in whichever scenario we would like to.
Yeah.
So we have just a few minutes left. So the last question is around advice, and what advice you would give to other women, either who want to step into leadership roles or just advice in general. Nikki's got her.
Have your best.
Yeah, this is my final one.
Oh, nice.
Living your best life starts today.
Living your best life starts today. If you see something that you want to do or start, don't let another day go by. Start it now, because you don't really know how much time you have. So if you want to do something, go for it. Again, success is all relative. But I think if you don't plan to do things, they don't get done. You know, I know people who say, well, I'm going to travel. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. And then 10 years later, have they gone? Not unless they've planned the trip. So I think if you see something and you thought, well, maybe I should, you know, start my own business or write a book or write a poem. Well, then just go ahead and try it. You've got really nothing to lose. So that would be my advice.
In our effort, the BUIT effort, after hearing everyone's story, we created a mentoring framework, and it's like 4 little bubbles. So the first bubble is about figuring out about yourself, like what you want, what your strengths are, you know, who you are, everything about self-introspection. The second is like finding a mentor, because to all of us, it was big on having somebody help you, sponsor you, guide you. The third one is building relationships within your group, above, down, across, you know, which is very big for me. I never knew that I needed to branch out and, you know, talk to other people outside of my team, until one of my mentors said, hey, you know, you need to kind of work on your relationship building skills. And then lastly, taking advantage of the opportunities in your company, in your community, in your industry, and, you know, like prioritizing the time for it. But out of all those 4 bubbles, to me, the biggest thing is the first one. You know, especially when you're young in your career, sometimes you don't look at yourself. It's everybody else's fault, like, you know, but at the end, as you mature and grow and go through life's journey, you know, you keep honing that view of yourself. And it really is all about that. The more you love yourself and accept yourself and just be comfortable with who you are, the more you're able to give and shine. So
I have a few, and one is I really believe in journaling. And to me, a journal is a place where you can say anything. You might want to put it where nobody can see it. But that dumping ground, that ability, like even if you can't say something to someone else, you can put it in the journal. You can keep your thoughts. You can record things in your life. You can set goals. You can use journals for so many different purposes. And it doesn't mean you have to do it every day, but a semi-regular practice of journaling is really an important tool. I also think being really conscious of language, and not just the language we speak to other people, but more importantly, the language we speak to and about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I implemented something at the Writers Center in my own workshops that started with the Young Authors Academy, which is the sorry jar. And it comes from when I used to host open mics and people would walk up and say, well, bear with me. I just wrote this on the bus, so I don't know how good it is. And immediately everybody's... Oh, good. I also learned to ignore things like that. But so the idea of, there are so many times that I hear myself and I hear other people, particularly women, mostly women, making negative statements about themselves, mm-hmm. and taking the time to re-script that. And so what if I look at it a different way? Hold up, don't say that. Don't say that about yourself, because every time you say something negative, your subconscious absorbs it and believes it. It doesn't know how to distinguish between a joke and the truth. It only hears the language, and that is a very deep part of our motivation in the world. So if you're having trouble re-scripting the way you speak to yourself, start a sorry jar. And every time you say something negative, put a quarter in every time you apologize to somebody for something just because. Like, how often have you said, this is another statistic I've read. Women so frequently start an email with a, I'm sorry, it's been so long. I'm sorry, I apologize for, and I do it all the time, rather than, hi, I'm getting back to you. You know, I think maybe I'll start that tomorrow, actually. I'm getting back to you now. But we apologize a lot, and we make excuses for ourselves for not being good enough. So if each time you put a quarter in the jar that you did it, you can take that vacation.
I can finally travel.
I made the mistake of leaving the Young Authors Academy sorry jar on the table in the classroom once, and
Someone just said.
front desk is on it again. So anyway, I think just being really conscious of the way you speak to and of yourself is one of the most important things that I find myself reflecting to friends. And the third one is have someone who you can always go to talk about something. Have a bestie you can always talk to, no matter who it is, that no matter what, they don't judge you, they hear you. And then they help you see your way through, and that shares your joys. Someone who can share your joys as well as your frustrations.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for your time and your wisdom. And I will say I have tried to replace I'm sorry with thank you. So thank you for your patience, or thank you for your time instead of apologizing. But in the wisdom and the advice around, start it today. And, if you want to do something, that self-work and taking the time to work on yourself and love yourself, and then the connections and making sure that you know who your community are and to support you and to believe in yourselves. So thank you so much for your time. This definitely filled my cup. And I was getting messages during this that it was filling others' cups who aren't physically in the room with us, but are out there virtually. And we really appreciate all that you shared with us. It was amazing. So thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Thank you.
Thank you.